The Pit is home to the Trogs, humans infected by the Troglodyte Degeneration Contagion, or TDC. If you've played Fallout 3's The Pit, you're probably familiar with them as savage mutated creatures that lurk in the polluted ruins of Pittsburgh. But what many people don't know is that years before Bethesda created those Trogs, Black Isle Studios had already designed an entirely different version for the cancelled Fallout 3, Van Buren. And unlike the monsters we eventually encountered, these Trogs were surprisingly human. According to the Van Buren design documents, the Trogs weren't the victims of pollution or a contagion. Their story begins before the Great War, with a group of isolated hillbillies living deep in the wooded mountains, far from civilization. When the bombs fell, many of them decided that the safest place to survive was underground. They retreated into nearby cave systems and waited for the war to be over. Because they were so far from the major targets and sheltered deep inside caves, they escaped much of the destruction and radioactive fallout that devastated the rest of the United States. What little radiation did reach them seeped slowly into the cave systems over generations, and when the world above them became the wasteland, they simply never left. The survivors adapted so well to cave life that they made it their permanent home. Over the next 2 centuries, generations of isolation gradually changed them. Their skin lost its pigmentation, becoming a dull yellowy white, while their hair also turned pale due to the loss of melanin. Their skin became thicker and more resilient to harsh conditions and the cold, but there was a downside. After spending generations underground, they could no longer tolerate direct sunlight, finding it too bright, making them a strange combination of the slags in Fallout 2 and the Trogs in Fallout 3. Eventually, some of them ventured back to the surface, and the people living up there started calling them Troglodytes. Before long, the name had been shortened to simply Trogs, and the descendants of those cave dwellers adopted the name for themselves. Hoover Dam would have appeared in the game, only its purpose went beyond energy production. At some point, a cave-in destroyed their previous home, forcing them to become nomadic, in search of another place to settle. Their leader, a man called Billy Bob, eventually guided his family to an underground section of Hoover Dam known as Baseline. Nobody argued with them over the territory, and when the NCR later established control over the dam, the Republic saw their existence as an opportunity rather than a problem. The Trogs would help maintain the dam's infrastructure and generators. In return, they would receive food and water. It was a simple arrangement that benefited both sides, and the Trogs became responsible for maintaining 2 of the only functioning generators in the entire settlement, which could be a problem if the NCR wasn't careful. Baseline served as both workplace and home for the Trogs. The abandoned offices, executive suites, storage rooms and maintenance areas were converted into living quarters for the community. While most citizens found the damp, dark corridors unpleasant, the Trogs actually preferred the cool isolation of what they called the Earth's belly. Most days were spent performing maintenance on the generators and electrical systems, quietly going about their work while avoiding much interaction with Hoover's other inhabitants. Although many people dismiss them as dumb hillbillies, the design documents repeatedly suggest this reputation was misleading. Beneath the simple speech and questionable hygiene was a practical wisdom earned through generations of survival. A wise waste walker, a survivor from the surface, could learn a thing or two from a Trog. Leading the community, as I said, was Billy Bob, also known as Pappy. Physically, he was described as an enormous man with shaggy white hair, a thick white beard, and pale skin, almost resembling a human polar bear or Santa Claus, if they remembered such a thing. Despite his intimidating appearance, he ruled his kin fairly, and was said to be easygoing once he trusted someone. His greatest concern, however, wasn't another faction or mutant threat, it was his youngest daughter. Mary Jo is perhaps one of the strangest characters planned for Van Buren. The reason her dad was so worried about her is because she had left the safety of the Earth's belly, Baseline, but what he doesn't know is that she's taken a job working for Dusty as an escort at Dusty's Desires. However, Mary Jo doesn't understand her line of work, instead thinking the men are just extremely nice and enjoy giving her and Dusty money as gifts. The sexual aspect, in her mind, is merely a fun bonus. She's described as friendly, approachable, not that smart, and more than happy to flirt with anyone. Billy Bob, meanwhile, only knows that she's spending far too much time around the Waste Walkers. If the truth is ever discovered by Billy Bob, then the Trogs actually rally behind him and go to war with the Republic. Another fascinating character connected to the Trogs was Otto Steed, one of the potential companions planned for the game. Otto was a ghoul engineer who wandered into Hoover Dam nearly a year after the NCR assumed control. Initially, NCR soldiers wanted to shoot him on sight, but their governor's curiosity spared his life. According to Otto, he was banished from a ghoul settlement far to the east of Hoover Dam, known as the Reservation. Wanting to repay Governor Dodge for saving him, he offered his services as an engineer, promising to repair and maintain anything that needed fixing. There was only one obstacle. The generators he needed to work on were located in Baseline, under the care of the Trogs. Fortunately, the Trogs weren't judgmental about his appearance, and Otto quickly earned Billy Bob's trust. Working alongside the Trogs, he managed to improve the generators' performance, and became their de facto supervisor while still respecting Billy Bob's authority. Perhaps his strangest feature, however, doesn't stem from the fact he's a ghoul. Instead of carrying a toolbox, Otto literally fastens bolts, screws, and various tools into his own skull and torso, pulling them out whenever repairs are needed. He was quite literally a living toolbox. Small details throughout the design documents make the Trogs feel like a genuine society, rather than a collection of NPCs. They sleep in converted executive offices alongside their families. The bathrooms technically still function, but the water running through Hoover Dam is contaminated, so the Trogs wisely avoid drinking it. Unfortunately, they don't exactly smell pleasant because of that fact. In true Fallout fashion, they've also constructed a homemade still connected to the old shower system, using discarded pieces from failed filtration experiments. The documents jokingly note that nobody has died or suffered extreme side effects from drinking Trog hooch, so it must be safe. Although, to be fair, the still has only recently been built by the time the playable character arrives at Hoover Dam. Speaking of the player, they could improve the filtration system and the hooch, although the effects, if any, are still unknown. Much of this lore was tied together through a surprisingly elaborate quest. Billy Bob wants Mary Jo to return home, believing she's simply spending too much time with the Waste Walkers, and the player has several options. The most destructive choice is to expose the truth. Convincing Billy Bob requires more than simply telling him. The player must prove they know intimate details about Mary Jo, including a distinctive birthmark on her inner thigh. The player can even name one of her customers, so Billy Bob can personally investigate for himself. The consequences are severe. Billy Bob declares war on Hoover Dam from within, the Trogs shut down the generators, and the Republic suddenly finds itself fighting both the Trogs and Caesar's Legion. Alternatively, the player can attempt to solve the problem peacefully by convincing Mary Jo to leave her job and return to her family. This requires exceptional persuasion skills, since she's genuinely enjoying meeting all of the nice men who give her gifts. If persuasion fails, another solution does exist. The player can simply buy her freedom from Dusty for 1,000 caps, after which Dusty tells Mary Jo to leave. Billy Bob then rewards the player with access to a new area called the Scum Pits. The Scum Pits are a toxic death trap located in the ruins of the dam's former pre-war generator rooms. The entire area is a chaotic mess of shattered concrete and jagged metal rods, which has allowed a bizarre and dangerous ecosystem to form. Inside you'll find a parasitic relationship between giant leeches, giant albino rats, and mutated ants that spit green acid. NCR Governor Dodge has tried multiple times, sending troops down there to clear the area, but the ants ambush them every single time, forcing them to seal the pits off for good. If the player manages to fight through these creatures and clear out the main ant hive, they will discover a sealed door hidden in the Queen's lair. Unlocking the door opens up sub-level 1C, a top-secret, flooded pre-war research laboratory. This hidden bunker contains advanced pre-war technology, data mainframes, and dangerous escaped biological experiments like centaurs and floaters. But the quest doesn't end there. If the player spends time with Mary Jo, there is a 1 in 5 chance that she becomes pregnant, and you can leave the area without ever knowing that she's carrying your child. Months later, bounty hunters from Hoover Dam try and bring you in. If ignored, the hunters are replaced by Trogs. Continue ignoring the situation, and roughly 9 months after the encounter, Billy Bob himself appears with a large group of his kin and politely, but firmly, asks the player to do the right thing and marry his daughter. A persuasive character can convince him that Mary Jo and the child are better off without them, remaining instead with their own people. Less diplomatic players can simply marry her before leaving again, while those who refuse to cooperate with Billy Bob have to fight him and his family to the death. Violence carries lasting consequences though, as Hoover Dam loses many of the very people responsible for maintaining its infrastructure. Meanwhile, Mary Jo continues working to support her child, without her family and without help from the player. What's fascinating is just how different these Trogs are from the ones that ultimately appeared in Fallout 3. Rather than diseased monsters driven by degradation, Van Buren imagined them as an isolated culture descended from pre-war hillbillies. They have their own dialects, customs, social hierarchy, and worldview. They maintained some of the most important machinery in Hoover Dam, brewed their own questionable moonshine, and found themselves at the center of one of the strangest questlines Black Isle ever designed. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you'd like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.